who was widely regarded as a hero, but was actually a terrible person. Bit of an odd one, but Coco Chanel. Not a hero in the traditional sense, but in fashion history she was a massive pioneer in bringing more comfortable and less restrictive designs to women. She saw and participated in the change from women having to wear corsets and gowns to being able to wear pants and work clothing, which was a massive thing for feminism. However, she was quite literally a Nazi. Chanel is now owned by the descendants of Holocaust survivors. The Jews quietly seized control decades ago, and they've insisted that the Nazism part never gets forgotten or buried. I think Behind the Bastards did an episode on her. According to Muggeridge, who was in Paris, she put up a sign that her perfume was free to GIs. This made her untouchable during the most dangerous period for collaborators. I write from memory. Oprah. Not so much a hero, but widely regarded in the industry, but she's done so much damage. She foisted Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz upon us, gave a platform to Jenny McCarthy and her anti-vax nonsense, and also John of God. Then there are all the scandals with her school in Africa. Horrible person. Behind the Bastards did a whole 6-part series on Oprah. It's worth a listen. They have episodes on Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, and John of God too. She was also one of the first people to prop up Trump as a presidential candidate back in the 80s or 90s. My mom watched her on TV. She had Trump on and asked him if he would ever run. Even as a child, I was asking, why would she ask him that? Who would want this guy in politics? And now he has Phil on televised ICE raids and has put Oz in a government position during both of his terms. People drag Joe Rogan for promoting pseudoscience and pushing dangerous quacks to the forefront of society. Meanwhile, Oprah is sitting right there releasing another product line. Every one of the defenders of the Alamo, since the whole reason they were there was to defend the right of Texans to own human beings. Texas was a part of Mexico, and Mexico had just achieved independence from Spain. And the first thing they did was declare slavery illegal. But Texas was not happy with that, so they immediately rebelled so they could keep their slaves. And a whole bunch of white volunteers showed up to help keep black people in chains. The hero of the Alamo was General Santa Anna. Henry Ford. He abused his workers, funded the Nazis, and hired thugs to violently attack labor unions. But for some reason, he's considered an American hero and praised for introducing the 5-day work week, something he had men killed to try to prevent. He wrote literal volumes about how much he hated Jews. He was a rabid anti-Semite. Most of what you said is true. However, if I recall correctly, he wanted the 5-day week, but managers, shareholders, and some workers didn't believe in it. So he most likely didn't kill people to prevent the implementation of the 5-day week. Obviously, he didn't want the 5-day week because he was a good human. He wanted it so that his workers had time to actually drive the cars they built. He also was a control freak. That makes perfect sense that he's an American hero, actually. Thomas Edison. He's praised as an inventor, but he stole ideas, exploited his workers, and even electrocuted animals in public just to smear Nikola Tesla's name. I loved that tweet that said Elon Musk is the Thomas Edison of our time, and I mean that as a slur. Bob's Burgers has a great episode with this. He also inspired Hollywood, because he fiercely fought over the patents for the cameras, and they had to go to the opposite side of the country to illegally shoot movies. The man with the yellow hat is an incredibly irresponsible pet owner. In the very first Curious George book, he straight up kidnaps George from a jungle, lets him smoke a pipe, and donates him to a zoo. Yo, it's not his fault, his pet was curious. Motherfucker owned a monkey, an apartment overlooking Boston Common, and a big country house down the shore. He's implied to be a scientist, or archaeologist maybe? Dude either has generational wealth or is doing some dirt somewhere to bankroll that goddamn primate. George is repeatedly referred to as a monkey, but he doesn't have a tail, leading me to believe he's really an ape and yellow hat guy, just looks even shadier. General George S. Patton is often praised for his military success, but his record shows serious flaws that undermine his status as a hero. He was known for his arrogance, cruelty, and lack of respect for the soldiers under his command. Patton physically assaulted wounded soldiers suffering from shell shock, calling them cowards, and his obsession with personal glory often put lives at unnecessary risk. His open admiration for authoritarianism and his racist, anti-Semitic remarks further reveal a man whose character falls far short of heroic. A fun fact about Patton is that he believed in reincarnation. He believed that he was a legionnaire in the Roman Empire in a previous life. NHL star Bobby Hull A hero to young hockey fans like myself and member of the prestigious Hall of Fame, was extremely physically abusive to both his wives. An autopsy was performed before he was buried, and his brain was riddled with CTE. The look of the injuries strongly suggested he'd had it for most of his playing career. Helmets were not introduced in the NHL until 1979. Hull was 40 and retired the next year, too late for a helmet to do much good. There is a lot of PR about CTE among NFL players, yet football players have been wearing helmets since well before World War II, with serious protection in place by the 1950s. If they get CTE despite the helmets, perhaps it is time to have a closer look at hockey, rugby, and other contact sports. Just a thought. Met him a handful of times, and he was extremely racist and misogynistic. Not a good dude, raging alcoholic as well. I'm a Hawks fan, and I was so relieved when they stripped him of his ambassador title. I was so disappointed. Every time they'd trot him out to an event, and he'd get a standing ovation. Yes, he was a fantastic hockey player, but he was a rotten person. When he was alive, Jimmy Savile. He did a lot of fundraising for charity, especially for the most vulnerable members of society, but he was regarded as just a weird guy. When he died, the floodgates opened, and we learned what a monster he truly was, and it demolished his legacy, thankfully. He wasn't just horrible, he was truly out to destroy mentally ill, sick, and vulnerable people. The stuff he got away with is absolutely sickening. That's the issue here. He lived a full life and never suffered any consequences. A tainted legacy means nothing to him when he is dead. The world isn't quite fair, is it? Ugh. Didn't have to scroll far to find him. I remember watching Sky News during the fallout. I worked for Sky at the time. News was on all day, and some old guy from a hospital who had reported, and of course the report got silenced, about how Jimmy would be allowed to do his disgusting stuff in the morgue, while whoever was on duty would just look the other way. But also the ward for people in various vegetative states, and also the ward for special needs kids, and other areas where people who couldn't consent but also couldn't say anything about it were. God, he was gross. J. Edgar Hoover. He was supposed to be representing law and order. He was a career killer by falsely accusing people of crimes they did not commit. I'm sure he legally murdered innocent people too. He went out of his way to charge homosexuals with the crime of being homosexual, all while being one himself. Terrible human being. I don't think anyone thinks of him as a hero, though. I don't think he's regarded as a hero at all. This is only the tip of the iceberg with Hoover. There are issues Americans are facing today that can be directly traced back to Hoover's actions. Henry Ford was a great innovator in manufacturing processes, and he was a great anti-Semite, racist, KKK affiliate, and general scumbag of a person. Calling him a bigot doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of how bizarre Ford as a person and businessman was. Ford had very strict rules for his workers that extended to their home life, and had an entire 200-person department of the company dedicated to spying on his workers and making sure they were model citizens. They would show up at workers' houses unannounced and interrogate people about their drinking habits and children's schooling. He set up an entire company town in Brazil called Fordlandia, where he essentially tried to recreate small-town America in the middle of the Amazon jungle, with zero regard to how different the culture of the natives working for him was. It had worker revolts, pests, and ultimately lost the company millions of dollars. It's a Jew flattening machine. You see a Jew, and you flatten him. Homie got name-dropped in Mein Kampf, after all. Henry Kissinger. Once you've been to Cambodia, you'll never stop wanting to beat Henry Kissinger to death with your bare hands. Anthony Bourdain. People consider Kissinger a hero? He's the only famous person that I know I'm related to. He was my grandma's second cousin or something like that. The relation was even mentioned in my birth announcement in the newspaper back in the 80s. I didn't know who he was, but it didn't stop me from bragging about it in the 90s. Then I learned about who he really was and very promptly stopped telling people that I was related to him. Dude was a piece of shit. Andrew Jackson. But what do? We put Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill. The man who ethnically cleansed the southeastern US, the Trail of Tears. A man who didn't just own slaves but bought and sold them as a business. In short, he was the Netanyahu of his day. This is not a man that should be honored, he should be shunned. And don't use the excuse that, well, that's what the times were like. That is a lame argument. Human suffering is absolute. There is no pain that a 19th century oligarch felt that was any worse than the suffering endured by anyone at the hands of slavery. 100%. When they were talking about putting someone else, Harriet Tubman maybe, on the $10 bill instead of Hamilton, I remember thinking, why wouldn't they get rid of Jackson instead? He was such a turd. Came here to say this: Trail of Tears is on his hands. Furthermore, he really shook the foundations of the country, actively going against the Supreme Court and threatening the checks and balances of the states. He was a terrible genocidal tyrant, and he should be solidly considered America's most evil president. Sorry, but John Lennon was a real piece of shit. Wrote Working Class Hero while owning an entire apartment to keep his furs at the perfect temperature. Decried being abandoned by his parents while turning around and doing the same to Julian. Claimed to be a house husband while Sean had a full-time nanny. Even Sean admitted he screamed into his ear so loudly while angry it broke his eardrum. Turned George against Paul. Had affairs on both wives. I could go on for hours. I love his music though. Imagine no possessions, arrives in a pink Rolls Royce. Wife beater, mocked people with disabilities, went on holiday a week after his son was born, leaving wife and child behind. General all-around arsehole. Good at music though, so there's that. Alexander Graham Bell was an absolute menace to the deaf community. In school, we always just learned about him in passing because he made the telephone, but in my ASL class, it turned out dude was atrocious. Edit. The moral of the story is, he believed in eugenics. According to Wikipedia, over the course of more than 30 years, Bell sought to produce a breed of sheep with multiple nipples that would bear twins. I'm not sure if you needed this information today, but I thought I'd drop it. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. It really helps. Subscribe for more, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one.